Okay, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Talk Bigfoot with the IBRO. Um, this is a bit of a special show. As you can see, I'm all dressed up and ready for the woods because I'm actually in the woods. It's um, it's only the second show that we have done like this. The rest of them's all been indoors, obviously. But um, yeah, the first one we done was with Jim Bradley actually, and um, it was in the woods, but we used audio only, which was a bit pointless. But this time we're using video. Brent, of course, my guest is the special guest here tonight. Brent is nice and cozy in his Paranormal Portal studio. Hi, Brent.
Hi, brother. How you doing? Sorry, my tongue doesn't work quite yet, but I'll get there.
It's too early in the morning to think for you guys, Brent. That's maybe why.
Yeah, I'm really a night owl by nature, so I'm up at 1, 2, 3 in the evening and in the morning, and then getting back up again. I'm just working on my rocket fuel right now to get geared for the day. So, but I'm doing good. Thank you. Really appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on, Brent. Of course, guys, I'm sure you guys know Brent well from the Paranormal Portal. Brent has also recently done the narration for our own documentary, The Woodwose. And of course, Brent is a researcher in his own right into many things, not just Bigfoot, of course, but he's into quite a lot of different subjects, as I'm sure many of you guys know. But Brent, we'll probably just we'll start off. We'll come to the Woodwose later on, of course, but uh, can I maybe start off, Brent? Firstly, it's great to have you on. It's nice to have you on the other side of the stick for
Yeah,
once. You know,
sure.
you're always you're always getting people on, and you're doing the questions, and everybody else is giving you the answers. So it's nice. It's nice to do it the other way around. And I seen a while back, maybe a month or two back, was it? You had Vic Cundiff on yourself,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and you turned the tables on him. So
That was a lot of fun. It was a great interview too. I mean, Vic's a fantastic guy. I of course knew of Vic for years, but working with you guys and when we were on that show, it was like, I really had never thought about it, but I was like, I would love to have a chance to talk to this guy and just see who he is and what he thinks about these things because it's the same thing. He's always getting the interviews, not so much interviewed. So it was a lot of fun to talk to Vic one on one and with Don and myself, and we had a fantastic show with him, and he's a fantastic guy. It was a great time.
brilliant. Yeah, I have to say I really enjoyed it. It is nice, obviously, because obviously these guys and like yourself too, Brent. You do pick up a lot of stories doing the
Hmm.
job that you do. This wee show that we do, it's not a regular thing that you guys have or like Vic has or whoever else. But it is, this is our first show, I suppose, in maybe 2 months. But
Oh,
as we're like yourself, so we had people on who had, researchers and stuff or whatever has been on, and they've been
mhm.
telling us their stories. But it definitely is nice to have somebody like yourself on who is well tuned into, interviewing others. So we've got a great show ahead, guys. But Brent,
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
first first of all, obviously, this is talk Bigfoot. So I mean, if we deviate off Bigfoot, that's fine. But obviously, people's gonna want to know how you got into Bigfoot in the first place.
Yeah, it's one of those questions it's hard for me to answer because I don't ever remember a time where I wasn't absolutely fascinated with this, and I had an experience of my own, and I'll share that in just a moment. But I've always loved the paranormal, the weird, the unexplained, and such, and I think it's because I love that there's still mystery, that there's still discovery in this world, that everything isn't all nailed down and labeled and categorized and shelved in a scientific community somewhere. That there's still lots for us to learn and lots for us to discover and to bring to light. And I've loved ghosts, UFO, the whole spectrum, and of course the Bigfoot and Dogman and anything unexplained that's isn't quite in the normal. Hence the word paranormal. If it's not normal, it's paranormal. But I think it's fascinating that there's so much going on in this world all around us, but we have these blinders on, and we tend to be just tuned in to our whatever is right in front of our face. Like you think of the horse that's pulling the buggy. All they got is this one little window ahead of them. They just go to the road, and that's it. And for the most part, can't see much of anything else. And I think that that's our reality as well. I think that there's whole spectrums of things existing around us, and we've just been trained to Monday through Friday work for the weekends, pay your bills, be a good person, and this real conditioned response. So this is the adventure. This is the mystery and the intrigue that's still out there, that isn't all tamed and captured in the hubris of men. So I think that that's exciting to me. The Bigfoot in particular, I loved monsters since I was way little. I remember, being a kid going to the local library because we, we didn't have an internet. So I'd go to the local library and look at all the monster books, like what I could find was basically the monster movies. There was Godzilla, there was Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, Lon Chaney, that whole spectrum of these black and white film actors doing Dracula, the Wolfman, Frankenstein, the Mummy, etc. And I was fascinated by that. In that, I just thought it was great. And then I found out about a Bigfoot, and I found out. I think the first thing that introduced this concept to my life was Leonard Nimoy in Search of, and I was
Mm.
like, wow, there's this big thing out there, and it's in the Pacific Northwest, and it's this incredibly huge, ferocious beast that's roaming the mountains, and it just brought that whole spectrum of things to life for me. That there was this creature out there. It was this being that was terrorizing people and terrifying people. And not that I like people being terrified, but it's the idea that it's kind of a step back in time when our ancestors were reaching out to the world around them. The world was full of unknowns, and yet they still had the tenacity and the bravery to go ahead and go forth into that and figure it out. And that adventure, that sense of adventure, was still there. So I learned about that, and I thought it was fascinating. Obviously my exposure to information on it back then was extraordinarily limited. It was literally in search of, and then if I could find any mentions in the library, in just a handful of books in a small town library. And I thought it was fascinating. But when I was 14 years old, I lived in Minnesota. Where I grew up was butting right up to a state forest. And a friend of mine would always hike up the hills, the bluffs they call them there, and it was kind of a ritual for us. And I mean, I'd been up those hills hundreds of times, and possibly thousands by the time this happened. But I'm 14. We'd hiked up the hill. We're having, it was a summer day, having a good old time, but it was getting late, and so we had to hike back down through, and there's no houses or anything up there. So we're coming back down, and we're going down this ravine, and we get to this dry waterfall. So there's basically a dried stream bed, but it was only active when the snow melted in the springs. So we're standing there on the edge of this waterfall, and it's dry. There's no water at all. So we're just taking a break on our way down. Now we had hiked down into this, and obviously we were all alone. There was nothing there, but we stopped on the edge of this waterfall. It was about a 8-foot drop in front of us to a bunch of boulders, and other rocks, limestone blocks and stuff that were in the ravine. And we're standing there getting a breath, and suddenly there's a deep and ferocious rumbling, growling behind us, like right behind us. I mean, like it felt like it was right on top of us, and I was absolutely terrified. I felt this rumbling more than I heard it. It shook my entire body, and I couldn't move. And it's not that I couldn't move; it's just that whatever made that sound in my mind was about to kill me, and I didn't know what made the sound, and I couldn't bring myself to look because the one comfort I was going to have was that I didn't have to see it coming.
Yeah.
Stood there and this growling's happening, and then nothing else, just this ferocious, deep, rumbling growling. And now I grew up in this area of Minnesota, and the biggest thing we have there is white-tailed deer. Otherwise, it's raccoons, it's fox, it's these small little animals, nothing that could make that kind of a noise. and my mind is whirling. I can't figure out what it is, and still never did at that time come to the conclusion that maybe it's Bigfoot. I just didn't know what it was, but it was big and it was growling and it was going to kill me. And my friend and I said to my friend, "What is that?" And he said, "I don't know, but we got to get out of here." So you're in a situation like that. You're terrified. There's two options. There's fight or flight. Whatever made that noise, I knew I couldn't fight. There was nothing I was going to be able to do as a 14-year-old kid. So the only option left was to run. Now they say don't ever run, don't ever run because you'll trigger that predator response. But that was the only option left. That was it. All we could do was run. So we ran down this boulder field, down through this dry run, and we ran for the better part of a mile straight through this horrible this horrible terrain. But we made it. And whatever it was didn't follow. Now, for years and years and years, I carried that in my head. Somewhere in my head was always that, what was that? What could that have been? And I had nothing. I had no concept of it because, I never thought of Bigfoot because Leonard Nimoy said that that was in the Pacific Northwest. It wasn't in Minnesota. And so it wasn't until many, many years later, I started learning about Bigfoot and I started to learn what people attribute as signs and of their presence and things to look for, tree breaks, potential structures and things like that. And as an adult, about, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, somewhere in there, I took my eldest son and we hiked into those same hills. And I started looking around with this new knowledge of what to look for. And suddenly these signs were everywhere. I'd never known before that what to look for. So none of it stuck out. It was just the woods. But suddenly I'm tree break. We found this structure of broken wood, and none of it was cut, and it was all tucked back way away from anywhere where people would see it. And suddenly, it just became real like, oh my God, I might have an answer to what that was. And so I believe that was my first and only close encounter with a what could have been a Bigfoot. But I didn't see it. But I'm here to tell you that was the most terrifying moment of my entire life.
That was awesome, Brent. Yeah, I think I personally from stories that I've heard myself, both here and in North America and beyond, I don't think it necessarily needs to be a visual sighting. People have had experiences similar to yourself, and I think that in most cases is enough to know. Like you said, what other animal in Minnesota, at that time could make that sort of a noise? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's the same in many states across America, different parts of the world, where there is no known animals of that size that could make that sort of a noise, But obviously, terrifying to say the least,
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It was horrifying, absolutely horrifying. But it did continue to whet my appetite because there was this new mystery in my life. I didn't know what to make of it for so many years, and you make nothing of it. I think the first thing that I ever heard that approximated the depth of that growl was in the first Jurassic Park movie when that big T-Rex is standing outside of that car where the kids are, and it comes down. It's just
yeah.
and I heard that, and suddenly I just got my hairs going up all over my body, and it's just like, I could feel, I could remember that terror of that moment, and that was the closest thing I'd ever heard to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't similar to myself at one stage. I think I told you about it, Brent, on one of your shows, and it was quite similar. I don't know whether it was louder or less louder than yours, obviously, but something similar. By the way, guys, in case you're only watching this 15 minutes in, Brent's in his lovely warm studio. I'm in the woods, and if all of a sudden you see me pointing a torch and looking about or whatever, I'm just making sure there's nothing coming because I am deep in the woods. But yeah, so this is just a backup, Brent, just in case, buddy. Because there's been a few things we've done, I guess, with guys and girls in the past, and there has been a few strange things going on. So you never know, and that's why I've said tonight we'll do this with the visuals because it means if something does turn up, I can just say, Brent, hold on a wee second, buddy. Here we go. Here's Bigfoot.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you what, I'll be watching over your shoulders to look for that eye shine or something, man.
Yeah, definitely. But anyway, back to you, Brent. Obviously, the early experience, and obviously you were very young at that time. That's led to where you are now. Eventually, you've got to where you are now from that.
Mhm.
And I have to say, well, I didn't have any encounters when I was young or nothing like that, but I was into the same sort of things as yourself from a very young age.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people in the Bigfoot community probably are. I mean, there's very, very few people in the Bigfoot community who I know who aren't into UFOs or who aren't into ghosts or
Mhm.
whatever, or have got some sort of an interest maybe even in them. But of course there is the few that don't, you know. There
Sure.
is the few that don't, But obviously, you've got your own show, the Paranormal Portal. You have people on speaking about Bigfoot, people speaking about UFOs, ghosts, and all these different things, all these different phenomena. Is there one that you would pick over the rest, or are they just the same? Or
The weird thing is, Chris, is that I may be peculiar in this way, but I've had several ghost experiences through my life, hauntings. I've lived in a haunted house. I've seen things that have happened through the years. I continue to experience weirdness, and part of that might be from doing the show. I don't know if there's such a thing as magnetism or whatever. When you talk about things, you summon them to you. But I've seen a UFO. Right up close and personal. I've been I've well that had that close encounter with the Bigfoot, and I've researched a little bit of the Bigfoot stuff up here in the Pacific Northwest where I live now, and have seen what they do. So I I don't know if I have a favorite. I tell you. Having experienced all of it, I can't say that any one of those experiences was more profound than any of the others. They've all been absolutely amazing, and I feel really fortunate, I guess, to have seen so many things that are just considered impossible by the public at large, and I love them all. Some for the same reasons, and some for very different reasons. I love the Bigfoot phenomena because I like the idea that we don't have this all, the hubris of mankind that, oh, well, this is everything that is, and we know it, and that's it, the end. That bothers me. I love the fact that there's still these enormous creatures, and maybe several kinds of different enormous creatures and small creatures that are possibly living in our world. And I love that world that still has that mystery, because I don't know if I want to live in the world where it's all figured out, it's all nailed down, and there's nothing left to learn. I love that we still have things to learn, and I love the fact that you know I think that the ghostly phenomenon is a really great reminder that life continues, and I think that that's beautiful, and it can also be horrifying and terrible, but um, that this isn't just it for us, because then you run into well, you got this one life and that's it. When it's done, lights out, boom. And I don't like that. And I love
yeah,
the idea that maybe there are people or beings from afar that have made it further than we've made it, and maybe they're keeping an eye on us. I like the idea that maybe there's a big cousin somewhere taking a little bit of an interest at what we're doing, because I swear to God, this world is, it's wonderful, it's amazing, full of incredible people, but it's also a mess. And I shudder to think that there's
mhm,
nobody babysitting all of this. So I love them all for different reasons.
cool. But you've obviously, as you just said, Brent, you've lived in Minnesota and now you're up in the Pacific Northwest, and
Mhm.
obviously you've been um, in the woods in Minnesota, and you've been in the woods in the Pacific Northwest. A lot of people on Bigfoot believe that there's different types of Bigfoot that you touched on briefly there.
Mhm.
Was there anything that you could see between Minnesota and the Pacific Northwest that would suggest that the Bigfoots in Minnesota are different than the Squatches up in the West?
Yeah, personally, no, because I haven't been involved in a whole lot of that. I haven't talked to a lot of local eyewitnesses versus eyewitnesses in Minnesota. I've talked to hundreds of witnesses from everywhere, and generally, there seems to be, commonalities in everybody's experience. But um, I I've just heard anecdotally those differences, and it seems that the Pacific Northwest and up into Canada and Alaska, Bigfoot are incredibly big. They're rumored to be the biggest of them that are out there.
Yeah.
In Minnesota, honestly, Chris, even though I had that encounter and came upon that knowledge that they are everywhere, I also the thing is that I do still have a bit of a, I don't want to say skeptical mind, but at least I like to logic this stuff as much as I'm able to challenge it. And what I can tell you is that I do hear reports of there being these drastic differences. You hear, God, it looked like a guy, it looked like a human being, just like a person, except it had hair all over and was enormous. Then I've heard it looked like a chimpanzee, except
Mm.
enormous with hair all over it. It looked like an orangutan with the hair all over it. And you hear these disparate explanations, but and those are probably very true, all of them, but I think that sometimes the descriptions are subjective to the person's reality.
Mm.
Everybody sees things uniquely, and in a adrenalized state like that, each person's going to take something a little bit different from that same experience. And so I do believe there are. I really do. I've heard, of course, of the skunk apes generally being 7, 8, 9 feet tall. Moving up north, they can be 10+ feet tall. And there are certainly, excuse me, there are certainly those that tend to look more like apes or primate, and those that
Yeah.
tend to look really, really human. And I think there is something very strong to that. Now, is it what I wonder about is it just a diversity of population? Because if you look at human beings, there's incredible differences between each person. If you lined up 100 people, they could look incredibly different from each other. Some of them would be 5 feet tall. Some of them would be 6.5 feet tall. Some of them would have very round faces. Others very narrow. There could be gaunt builds. There could be really beefy builds. And we as people have quite a bit of diversity in how we appear.
Mm.
Does that necessarily mean there are different types of us? Well, yeah, to a degree, but we're all human beings. So I don't know about that. I guess I believe there are. And the other part of it is how much could be out there? How much really could be out there that we don't know? And because we do have stuff going on pretty much in most places in the United States. Just for example, like there are vast expanses of wilderness, but there's more expanses of civilization. And I think that could there be that many things out there? Well, honestly, yeah, there could be, but it's hard to know what to take and how far to take it. I just try to keep an open mind to it all, brother.
Yeah. Minnesota, like from what I've heard over the years, they've got a lot of reports of both Squatch, obviously because it's pretty, sort of in between.
Hmm.
The areas it's got reports of Squatch and reports of the Almas type or the wild man or
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it. People's got their different names for it, but it's
Right.
generally believed to be a little bit smaller than Squatch, and it does look like basically a Neanderthal covered in
Hmm.
hair. You know,
Right.
I think with like you said, with the differences and stuff in facial features or even bodily features. Obviously, if they are anything like us, they are going to look different, in some way. But I think when you get to the extent of one looking like an orangutan or a chimpanzee, and the other one looking like a bit like a human, well,
Hmm.
then that's clearly a different species. Then,
It would seem so, yeah, and I don't discount that or discredit that at all. I tend to believe that that's probably the case, but like I said, then I gotta I think to I think it's important to challenge every point of view and kind of debate it and weigh it against possibilities and stuff. And I think that you're probably right, but maybe it's not. I don't know. It's hard to say. And the biggest discrepancy comes in the fact that most often we have witness reports that are 3 seconds, 5 seconds long, and while those experiences are incredibly intense, they are very brief, and it's possible that, people's memories aren't as clear as other people's, and some people are better witnesses than other people because of their state of mind, their adrenaline, their so many factors involved. But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly open to all ideas.
Like, I mean, there's witnesses, as you know yourself, who see something, whether it's a ghost, a Bigfoot, or a UFO, and they run for the hills.
Yes.
And then there's other witnesses like myself, because I'm a researcher, who will stand and watch it, and get the camera out. That's probably the way you are now, where when you maybe were young, having your sighting, you thought differently, of course, but
Yeah.
now you probably, I would guess, you're probably the same as me. Okay, get the camera on it.
I would certainly try to be, and I would like to believe that I am, but thank God I haven't experienced that kind of intensity too often. But yeah, I mean, I would hope to be a much better witness today than I was when I was 14.
I'd imagine you would be, Brent.
Yeah, and I think part of it is just having a vocabulary for it, because when I was 14, I had no idea what it was. I mean, it could have been, it could have been
Yeah.
a Godzilla, it could have been anything. I just knew that it was big and it sounded really pissed. And now I would have a vocabulary for it, like, oh my God, that could be a Sasquatch. Let's check it out. So having at least some framework to put it in, I think would help me as an adult witness versus being a kid and having absolutely no idea what it is. It's the big unknown.
I think even for a lot of researchers, Brent, even like myself, like I've always got this fear, right? Like I've mentioned before to people, that I'm okay with maybe seeing a Bigfoot, maybe even 10, 20 feet, 30 feet,
Yeah.
plus. But the one that always worries me is the Matt Moneymaker one, where it just sticks his head through the hedge right beside you, and sort of says hello and growls at you.
Yeah.
That's the one. That's the one I don't want. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think the further the better as far as that's concerned. It's kind of like seeing a tornado. If you're looking at it from a mile away, it's kind of intriguing and unique. But if you're running from one, it's a whole different tornado. So I think, yeah, I'd like to be able to observe them from a distance and not having to worry about if it was going to pull my head off next.
Of course, yeah, definitely, I definitely agree. I think most researchers are probably the same. Yeah, you're probably going to get a mad researcher somewhere. Yeah, bring it on or whatever. Let him come up beside me. But I don't think there's too many of us.
Oh, probably not.
Just on the what's this is off subject. Actually, do are you guys going to be able to see the alignment of the planets today? This show that we're recording, by the way, guys, this is going out the next day, but we're recording this on Monday, the 21st of December, and this is the day of the conjunction of the planets. Are you guys able to see that from where you are, Brent?
I just looked out the window, and we've had a really unusual winter here. We usually get a lot of snow, but we've had we had 8 inches of snow early in the season, but it all melted. Now we're getting rain, and I looked outside and it's really overcast. So I don't know what my possibilities of seeing that are, but I hope so.
Yeah, it should be later on, and obviously it'll be, well, for us, it was pretty low in the sky. Um, I think we're a little bit higher in altitude, or from you guys in the Pacific Northwest, but that means you might actually see it a bit higher in the sky.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, you should, after the show, you should Google that, because I went to go and see it before we done the show, and it was overcast. So, you know,
Oh,
it
yeah.
was given, actually, the weather actually gave clear this evening, but it ended up being cloudy. But you guys might see it, and it might be higher in the sky. It's just because we're higher up on the earth than you guys are, so it was really low on the horizon for us. But
Oh,
because you guys are probably a little bit lower than
mhm.
us, well then you might get to see it better.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see it because, of course, it's one of those events that apparently only repeats every 800 years. But hopefully, I'll be able to see it. But I guess if I can't see it here, I'm sure somebody will record it and put it online so I can at least see what it'll look like.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
cool. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Very neat. I mean, it's really an interesting time for so many reasons, but there's certainly been a lot of astronomical things going on lately as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
UFO lights as well.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I forget what it was, but I looked at an article, and I just glanced at the headline, but it said something like sightings of UFOs in, I think it was New York State, is up like 200 and some percent. And I don't know what's going on. I think it's awesome, but makes you wonder if there's more of them around or if people are just not as occupied as normal due to all the lockdowns and stuff.
Yeah, well, could be both, but
Yeah.
you'd almost think that they're maybe trying to do a bit of disclosure. Who knows? I mean,
Yes.
they've been promoting the new American Space Force, so
Yeah, yeah, it's exciting because again, I've witnessed that personally, and I had seen a flying saucer through night vision, through infrared vision. The Generation One night vision binoculars, and it was right there. It was right in front of me, and it was incredible. And it was only visible in that night vision mode. Like when I lowered and it was giving off light in the night vision. It had this, it was a saucer with rotating lights around the perimeter of it. And as soon as I lowered the binoculars to see it for myself, because it was up close, it was like maybe 150 yards from me. And I looked to where it was, but it didn't exist in the sky with my naked eyes. It only existed in night vision. So I was like, oh my God, they can cloak, they can hide.
yeah, yeah. I think that's what probably most of the case is with a lot of them. They're probably freaking everywhere.
Yeah.
And especially with your own experience. I mean, if they're cloaking, who knows? There could be one beside me now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was what was really intriguing, and I had no concept for that. I mean, of course, I knew UFOs were out there, but I was never really profoundly searching for them. Just always looking up in the sky, trying to see something. And it wasn't until I had those binoculars that suddenly there it was. It was like, oh my God! I mean, it's again just like Bigfoot. You have an open mind for it. You have a belief that they're out there, and you're accepting of that, but it's no comparison to standing there looking at one. And that was the same for me with the UFO, the flying saucer. It was just like, now I know what they, really know what they mean by nowhere. I know they were there. I've seen it, and it was incredible.
So obviously, Brent, with your show, you've had a lot of guests over the years. You've had a lot of interesting guests. You've got famous people on your show. You've had Bobo Fay that works on your show.
Mhm.
Is there any particular sighting of Bigfoot that sticks out in your mind that maybe one of your guests had shared with you, or that maybe you would say, "Wow,"
I think, honestly, excuse me. Hold on, I got a cough. I think that I honestly am blown away by all of the witnesses, and it's not because there haven't been some really fantastic stories, because there have. But the thing is that all of them are fantastic because, to these people, a lot of times they were life-changing events. Whatever they experienced, whatever they observed, profoundly impacted their life and changed the trajectory of their lives in many cases from then on. And I find them all incredible. I think probably of all the stories, the most profound that I've ever heard from guests, whether it's a person or anybody, are generally the Bigfoot ones, and the reason why, and Dogman for that matter too. But the intensity of those experiences are so incredibly high. Like, there's plenty of people that, I saw a mist go through my room, or I saw orbs, and I saw something move, and they're incredibly intense as well. But the I've never heard of a phenomenon more so than the Bigfoot Dogman one that actually changes people's lives. Like where people will not continue, like they did lifelong hunters, spent their whole lives out in the wood. It was their big, it was nearly a religion for them to go out and hunt every fall. And then to see one, and those very same people don't go to the woods anymore. They just cannot bring themselves to go back out there because suddenly their world changed. Or, to hear a story of someone having a dog man like, 5 feet away from them, growling, and, those kind of intensities are so incredibly profound and powerful. Now, certainly seeing a UFO, or seeing flying saucers, or whatever is life changing in that it expands. I think it expands your paradigm, and same for ghosts and spirits and whatever. but I've never heard from UFO observers or spirit encounters that it so profoundly impacts everything in their lives. Where like UFO people don't stop going outside, because they might see one. But there are so many people that have absolutely changed their life profoundly because they've come face to face or close encounter with a Bigfoot or a dogman. Those are incredibly intense.
I think in those instances though, it's possible that obviously when people see a UFO, like you said, they don't want to go back out, in case they see another one. But people in that situation, I think, probably are under the likelihood that that's not going to happen. But where if you see a Bigfoot in the woods, if you've been a hunter all your life and you see a Bigfoot in the woods and it scares you to death, then you're not going to go back in those woods because you're going to think that that can be anywhere in those woods. Where a UFO, you've got an open sky, you can clearly see if anything's there. But in the woods, especially in the woods, you can't always see that. The woods are thick places. There's bush, there's shrubs, and the mind plays tricks with that. And you're thinking, well, that Bigfoot can be anywhere here.
Yes, exactly. Like there's no place safe after those experiences. Once that happens, wherever you're in the woods, you're not going to be safe. You're never going to feel safe, and that's the impact I hear from these people. And that to me is, it's kind of tragic in a sense too, because whatever that experience was enough to take away something they loved, and to take away something they enjoyed. And I'm always, I sometimes have talked to people who were like, I didn't go back in the woods for years, but then I was like, no, I'm not going to allow this to take this away from me. And then they do overcome it. And those are really cool stories, because I think, you can't stop living your life because you got scared, and that's really, really simplifying. And I don't mean to say that, perhaps these people thought they were going to die. I'm sure they did, because the size and the imposing figure of coming up, I don't think most people can really even conceptualize what coming up to a 8 foot tall mountain of muscle that doesn't look happy to see you would feel like. But no, it's got to be absolutely horrendous. But they do overcome it, and they do reclaim their lives, and I think that that's really powerful.
Yeah, yeah. I think obviously there's people there too who are different, and of course, many people even who I spoke to, including yourself, who have had an encounter and they want to just get out in the woods and go see what they can see again. Can I see another one? Because
Yeah.
those people do.
hmm Yeah, well, I mean, and there's most of the encounters with Bigfoot, and I'm not certainly not with Dogman. It seems like the intensity of a Dogman experience generally is really, really meant to threaten people. But I think a lot of times the Bigfoot experiences, or they just don't really care. Sometimes it doesn't seem like they care if they get seen or not. It's like, oh, passing glance, and then they'll continue to walk. Whereas a Dogman, it's like you don't probably know they're there until they're charging at you, or they're growling at you through a bush or something. And so certainly that. But Don and I had a really interesting experience, and that was we were contacted by a homeowner up here who had 30 chickens. They lived out in the country, and right in the forest, and they had 30 chickens in their chicken coop. And they said that the people said that over a period of time, they kept noticing their chickens seemed less and less and less. It went from 30 chickens down to 9. There was no sign that anything had, like, any normal predator had grabbed them. Like, when a chicken gets grabbed by a predator, the first thing the predator does is to kill it, shake it or whatever, like a fox or a bird of prey if they get them, or coyote or whatever. They shake them, and you get this feather litter everywhere. There wasn't a feather anywhere. There was only oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead. Go ahead.
All right, but there was only a small hole about 8 inches long, and that in the chicken coop, and that was it. So they were all locked in and stuff. They shouldn't have been anywhere except inside of there. And there's a small hole in that chicken coop, and no feather litter ever anywhere. So that means something was coming in, grabbing these chickens, taking them somewhere else and then, doing what they do. So there was no feathers anywhere. And so they would just disappear over and over and over. They got down to 9. And, but these people were then behind their house in the forest, just doing mushroom hunting. And they came across a structure, which is a structure in and of itself is pretty ambiguous, but and that structure was situated, and it was really, really well hidden. It was like if they hadn't stumbled on it, you could have walked by that thing for years, never seen it. It was just so well camouflaged as part of the surroundings. Now there's not any teenagers or any kids around. Everybody in that area that lives in that region is older. They're very, very adults, probably in their 50s or more, and so there's not like a bunch of kids decided to build a fort. But what the structure consisted of was this 6-inch round sapling that was bent over into an arch, and then there's these enormous pines, these like ponderosa pines near there, where there were branches broken off about 30 feet up, and then these branches were used to cover that, and like were rudimentarily weaved, not a weave like you'd think of a basket, but you can see where they went into some, out of others, so it kind of had this pattern of structure. And I have photos of that too. I don't know if I've ever shared those with you, Chris, but but this was back probably about 40 or 50 yards away from the chicken coop, but again, incredibly hidden. And we found it, and we had a local lady, Cindy Goodbrake, who's a researcher. We called her out to look at it too, and there, I mean, that was it. And then once we went out there and looked into it, they repaired the chicken coop, and once we found that structure, we kept checking on it after that, and it was really, really pristine when we found it. But I think because we found it, because our scent was there, whatever had made it, which I think is a Bigfoot. I think there was probably a family group of Bigfoot that were moving in and grabbing chickens, but they then abandoned it, and so it just went further and further into disrepair. But just a really neat experience like that. That it was so subtle. It was if it hadn't been for the number of chickens, they may have never known they were even there. But they just kept grabbing chickens. They apparently didn't think the people would notice.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Brent, because I actually just read a story yesterday, I think it was. Some guy had seen a woodwose in England, I think, and it was running off with a sheep under its arm across the field. So running across the field with a sheep under the arm and into the woods. So,
my God. Yep, that's like their version of a drive-through, I'm sure.
Yeah. But of course, Brent, some of the guys here are going to be looking to know about the woodwose, and probably most of them are sick listening to me about it, and sick listening to Jim and everybody else. You've been a big part of it. You come on early part of this year, and you've been pretty busy at it since then. Of course, we're hoping to do part 3, which we can come on to shortly as well. But you obviously come on initially just to do a short voiceover for the trailer for part 1. Brent, what was in your mind, or what, did you think whenever you were asked to come on and do the full narration for part 2, did you brain freeze? Did you say, oh yes, or what was the feelings?
Oh, I absolutely jumped on it. I mean, I was really happy to be a part of it. It's just such an honor to be a part of a project like that, and I just really love the first one you guys did. I thought it was very, very well done. And when I did the trailer voiceover for the Prime release and stuff, it was a big thing to me. It was really cool to be involved in any measure. And then of course, in doing the Woodwose with you guys, it was so fun because one, I loved being able to get the sneak peeks to see what was going on, what you guys were experiencing and seeing out there. But two, it was really neat to be a part of that whole process and to be a part of the movie, not in just using my voice, but to write the narrations, to put together pieces here and there, and to talk with you about the way things were, and if I had any ideas. You were always so incredibly gracious and accepting of my participation on that regard as well. So it was really just a perfect situation where it's amazing to be a part of it, because this is such an incredible labor that you guys have undertaken, and it's really neat that I can be a segment of that and have to have contributed to that. And yeah, I just really loved it. I thought it was wonderful. First of all, I thought it was wonderful that you thought that that you thought my voice would be okay for that, because it's just such a flattering thing, right? But second of all, it was neat to be a part of that movie magic, to be a part of the whole process and see how that worked, and to contribute my little bit to it. And I just loved it. I really did.
Did you see, obviously you were given free rein to do basically say whatever you like. I think maybe you were given one or two parts where you had to say something sort of maybe even almost to the point or whatever it was, but you obviously had free rein, and you said your own thing. I think you mentioned before on one of the shows that we had, or maybe it was your show we were on, Brent. Actually, you talked briefly on it that you sort of just watched a little bit beforehand and watched a little bit afterwards and see what was happening before and after, and then went from there. But um, was there any parts that you found really difficult, to piece in, or?
No, I mean, really, it was. I just had to really identify what my role in it was, and to be honest with you, as I was doing that, I was kind of referring a lot to Mike Rowe on the Deadliest Catch series that he did, where he narrated those pieces and those parts, and I kind of thought, how did he do that? I went back and watched a few of those episodes again, just to see what was his process. And it was basically, you know, the narration is kind of like the seam work, where you're stitching it together and making it flow cohesively from one to the other. So it was challenging, though. Sometimes, I'll tell you what the most challenging part of it was thinking up new ways to say, because sometimes, you were researching here, then you're researching there, and you guys researched all over the place and did a phenomenal job. And the challenge for me was to come up with words that would keep that interesting all the way through. So I felt that, doing narration to me was like, I don't want to have my parts be the weak link, because your guys' research and footage was incredible. And so there was an incredible pressure on me to make the narration as engaging as I could to keep the audience's attention, because I didn't want my part to be the weak link. I wanted to be a strong link with you guys and just make it a real cohesive chain all the way through. And I really hope that I was able to do that. That was my objective. But sometimes it was just looking for words. Like I said, I want to say this, but I already said that 3 times over there. So I'm doing a lot of searches looking for new words to say some of the same things.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
obviously it all stitched together very, very well. I know, obviously, well, I actually done a bit of the narration on part one, and I wasn't happy with my voice, as I'm sure you know, and that's one of the reasons that we came looking for you. Obviously your voice and your expertise was the other, but that was the initial kickstart for that. I just said, listen, I'm not going to do this again, because it's bad enough listening to myself the whole way through the film without listening to myself in the in between bits as well. So
Sure.
that was part of the reason. And I do understand where you're coming from, that you were afraid of using the same words and things like that, and I'm going to repeat myself and all these sort of things. And
Right.
I did have fear myself. There wasn't as much narration in part one, I don't think, maybe.
Right.
Um, Probably not, actually.
Yeah.
Well, what the Woodwose is a longer film anyway, isn't it? It's like 2 hours 15, isn't it?
Yeah. 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 It was really cool. But I just loved. I love the fact that, now I'm part of this, and it's out on Amazon Prime, and people all over are going to be checking this out, and have checked it out. And I don't know, it's just one of those things that before you had asked me, I'd never really thought about doing that kind of thing, because I just do the shows, I do the podcast, I do the YouTube shows, and the internet radio shows. But it was like, wow, am I going to be good enough to do this? So some of it was just not knowing, and trying not to. If it didn't work out, I didn't want to waste your guys' time either. So, but I'm really thrilled that it did, and you guys again were amazing to work with because you allowed me not only to be a voice, but you allowed me to participate in it, which for me in my creative process was awesome.
And by participation, you mean you actually ended up in the film yourself, then, Brent, towards the end.
I did. Yep, that was really cool too because kind of puts a face to the voice.
I think at that particular time, I think we were standing, and because what happened at the end of part one with the ILO and stuff like that, we're brought on as to be the independent in this one. So I think we're all just standing there, sort of thinking, hey, we're going to get to look at this footage, you know what I mean? And having a cigarette, whatever we're doing, and hey, we're going to get, Brent. It's just one of those brain freeze moments, and then you suddenly realise you've got Brent. But yeah, so you obviously were brought on to adjudicate then, Brent, at the end, because obviously at this point, even Ron wasn't no longer independent at that stage.
Sure.
I'm not going to go deeply into what we're talking about. If we don't want to spoil the film for people. I know it's out there now. A lot of people have seen it. A lot of people know what we're talking about now at the moment, probably. But of course, for those folks who don't, I can maybe use code word here, Brent. I don't know, but whenever you seen that footage, initially, what was your thoughts?
I was blown away because it's not only was it there, but it was the clarity of it was just a shock. I was like, I couldn't believe it was not only present and part of what you were looking at, but it was so pristine, and I don't think I've ever seen that before. One famous thing about Bigfoot is that everything seems to be blurry. No matter who's recording or what they're doing, but that footage you guys caught was just amazingly clear, and I was absolutely shocked because I've seen hundreds or thousands of videos of people that have tried to document the Bigfoot, and a lot of the great majority of them are of course people just trying to see if they can pull the wool over other people's eyes. But I was really floored. I was like, wow, that's one for the ages.
Of course, on the part 3, you're going to be helping on part 3 as well, in case people don't know that. And it's probably a given thing that we're going to have to go back there, Brent. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I hope so. That was definitely a great location.
I know in the film, if people have seen the film, we did go back the next morning, and have a look around for prints and things like that. But surely we would need to go back and set up the way we were set up and see if anything shows up. Like, I know, in my view, without giving too much away again, that would be a waste of time, in my opinion. But it needs to be done to be a fair researcher. It needs to be done. But my mind personally is already made up. But it would be nice to go and see the area and sort of do it at night time again with the exact same equipment and level that up, I suppose.
Yeah. I think that you've got to challenge any results. You got to challenge and substantiate them. And I have no doubt that what you saw is what you saw. But yeah, I think that would be great too, because it was also a very active location. So the chances are you're going to catch something completely new too.
Yeah, of course, people often wonder, how do we go in there and get that sort of footage. But like yourself, the story you mentioned just a while ago about the chickens and the structures hidden in the woods. Well, that's what we went and done. So
yeah,
we had to find the evidence first to see where they were. Obviously, that's a technique you would probably advise people on yourself. Then, Brent, would it be? Or
absolutely. I think that when you find out, I think that's the big challenge for anybody researching these things is where are they, and that's the big unknown. I mean, nobody knows. There's lots of self-proclaimed experts out there, but truth is we know so little about these things. And if you can figure out where they are, that's 90% of the battle, I would think, because I think most often it's just, are they here? Are they here? Are they here? And you end up, looking around a lot, but you guys have seemed to have really identified where they are and have an opportunity then to, work and try to capture even more of of their presence and such.
Of course, part 3, as I said, Brent, you're going to be coming on for part 3 as well. Obviously, we've got to go through different sightings that we're going to use. We've got to go through the locations that we're going to use. And obviously, we have to have a few backups in case something doesn't work out or whatever this is. But is there any ideas that you would have in your mind for part 3, that you would like to see or like to see us return to, if we were to return to certain locations? Or
well, I wonder if it would be worthwhile to in some of those really active areas, if it was feasible, but to try to do some recording with like maybe a trail cam or something to see if you can catch something over a period of time, because I think it's a lot like any kind of paranormal research. I mean, it's like trying to catch lightning in a bottle. But if your bottle's there for longer, maybe you're going to catch more. And so if you could possibly go in ahead of time, place trail cams and just, secure them and then come back a week later and see what's turned up or something like that, if that would be possible, I think that then it lengthens your exposure to an area so much longer, and will give you a lot more to work with. And I know there's plenty of people saying you can't catch them on trail cams, but there are trail cam shots out there. I've heard that there's a lot of people that have them that won't release them just because it's a you're kind of entering the fray at that point, and people are gonna be people. And but I think that the longer you have the ability to work in an area, and by whatever measures that means, if it's just having stationary cameras around, the better. Because visiting, like that was my biggest critique of a lot of ghost shows. They go in for a night and they work a house like crazy, and then they leave. Well, if anybody's lived in a house that has a lot of spiritual activity, you may get a day or two a month where something's happening, and then the rest of the time it's just the house. And so I think that the longer you can place equipment and try to record stuff, the better.
Yeah. Even that area where we were in, Brent, obviously, we've, like I said, we went and found the evidence first of all, and we sort of knew where to go. And that Bigfoot's obviously different than ghosts,
Sure. Yeah.
It's a different thing than ghosts. Ghosts are generally in the same building or whatever, and like you said, they could maybe be there for 2 days and not there for 28 or whatever. But with Bigfoot generally moves around a lot. We think they do. Other people think that they stay pretty put as well. What would be your view on that, or do you think maybe is there cases where some of them move around and others don't?
I think there's cases where some do and some don't. I think it has everything to do with the available resources. So, like, if they're able to be in an area and continue to meet their needs, I don't think they will move, because anytime they move, that's, of course, it expends calories, it expends energy, and I don't think these things aggressively try to burn, their energy source. But I do think that in most cases they probably have a range. I think that they have a range of area that they may cycle through or circuit through. There's so many people that talk about, we don't have any activity until fall when it's hunting season, and then they seem to be a lot of things happening then. And maybe they've always been there, but people are just out in the woods more then. But I think if you look like at a brown bear, which I would assume has a pretty similar caloric need, they've got a huge range that they work in to to find food, forage, and to be able to sustain themselves. And so I don't see why that would be any difference for the Bigfoot. I think they're an omnivore, an opportunivore, so they eat where they can, whatever they can. And if there's an area that's really robust with meeting that needs, they probably don't move much. But I think it would all depend on the area.
And of course, you're obviously over in the States. Like we said at the start of the show, you're in Minnesota. You started off in Minnesota. You're now in the Pacific Northwest, and now you've been involved with a film with research in Ireland, which is like 3,500 miles from where you are now. Is there any differences that you've seen between activity, Bigfoot activity in where you are now, Brent, in Ireland, or is everything basically the same sort of stuff, or what do you think?
That's what I find the most amazing is that, so this is a global phenomena. And what I find really intriguing is that the behaviors don't seem a whole lot different between the Yowies, the Yaren, the Almasties and the Almas. They seem to have, and the Bigfoot and all of the versions throughout the U.S. and the Woodwose and the Gray Man. I don't know much about the Gray Man, but the point being that there's such a similarity between them, and that to me is really intriguing because even if these beings did start off in one area and then broke up to circle the globe, or however that worked, if it's a Pangea thing and they just spread out with the continents, or however it worked, I find it really incredibly intriguing that their behaviors are really consistent from Australia to the States to Canada, and all of the ranges that they're found in. I'm sure there's plenty of differences as well, but like in the Yowies, they don't seem to ever see the conical heads. They seem to have rounded heads, and pretty consistently. But other than those differences, it does seem pretty consistent, and I find that really intriguing.
And obviously, with part three in the planning, well, obviously we've got restrictions here with COVID at the moment. But
Oh,
what what are you hoping to see, or what would you like to see us catch on camera next time round, Brent?
well, I mean, everybody wants a new Patterson Gimlin film, right? So
Yeah,
I'd like for you guys to get one of those if you can. But outside of that, I think you guys have done a really comprehensive job cataloging and working with what's presented. And yeah, I'd love to see a full size Sasquatch crossing the road right in front of you. But I think the world needs that pretty much. But is that likely? Well, probably not. But have you ever? I don't know how you guys are geared, but some people talk about the importance of like wearing cameras on your back, like GoPros or something that are pointed behind you, because allegedly, what the legends say is that they like to follow people and they like to shadow people through their areas, and it
yeah.
would be interesting to see if you could catch something in that way, and with a camera, because I think they know. When we're well, maybe a camera looks a lot like a gun. I don't know, but they
Mm.
seem to know when things are pointed at them and don't seem to like it. So I think it really some people claim to have gotten great results by putting a GoPro on their back as they're walking away and through the ranges and finding interesting things. So, but
That's actually a really
what?
good idea, Brent. That's a really good idea.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Um, I do have to say that one of the things that really impressed me with your team's approach was the fact that you guys have a catalog of approaches. I mean, you're not just doing one thing, you're doing so many different things and you're innovating as well. And that's why I really like what you guys are doing over there because you're not stuck in one modality. You guys are willing to work with everything, and that's
Mm.
awesome.
That's a really good idea, Brent. And I have done that a few times myself with my phone or whatever if I'm out researching by myself.
Mhm.
But like you said too, they probably know that a camera's on them or whatever. So if
Mhm.
we had a hidden camera on the back, then maybe if we got a GoPro on the back hidden,
Yeah,
yeah,
that would be powerful. Maybe get some awesome footage.
yeah. Watch out for that one in part three, then, guys. That's Brent Thomas's fault if we catch something walking behind us.
I'm glad to help, brother.
But guys, unfortunately, we have come to the end of a great show, and of course, I'm sure Brent will be happy to come back on sometime. Um, Maybe whenever we can actually talk about the footage that we got, or we can come on Paranormal Portal and do the same, or whatever the case is. But yeah, fortunately, we've come to the end of the show, guys. I'm out in the freezing woods. In case you haven't noticed, it's about 4 degrees Celsius, I think, Brent, and dropping maybe.
Wow. Yikes.
I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's put it this way: if you're in the car, your frost light will be on in the car, so it's cold.
It's
But
cold.
Brent, thank you very much, brother, for coming on. as our special guest. I know we haven't done a Talk Bigfoot now in a couple of months, but we did say at the time that it wouldn't be a usual thing, that it would be a once in a while thing, of course. But thank you very much again, brother. Thanks for your input. Thank you for everything you've done on the Woodwose as well. And we look forward to hearing and seeing more from you, and whatever part three is going to be called. Who knows?
Well, again,
I don't even know. What about you, Brent? Do you have any ideas for that one just before we go?
I don't right now. I will certainly put my thinking hat on though and see if I can come up with a gem. But no, I just want to make sure to thank you and thank the team. I'm just really, really truly honored and thrilled to be a part of this journey, and it means the world. And thanks for letting me be a part of it.
You're welcome, brother, and thank you very much for joining us. And I'm sure our viewers have had a wonderful experience. And who knows when we'll see you again, guys. Talk Bigfoot, as I said, is not a regular thing, but hopefully we'll see you at some point in the new year. And between now and then, everybody have a happy Christmas, a happy New Year, and don't be eating too much turkey.
Perfect.
Thanks, guys.